I found out about Ken. We were just talking about the fact that we don't, in Acton, we don't have a local newspaper anymore. And, but I found out you were doing some other talk somewhere else, saw that, and contacted you, so that was great. So, please welcome Ken.
Well, thank you. It's nice to be here. And I've been in Acton, 4 different talks that I've done over the years to the Women's Club. I was at the school system. There's a, I forget the 3rd group. But anyway, here's the 4th group in Stowe, Acton here. So I've been and speaking all over the state and all over actually New England on honeybees. My yearbook, I was just telling folks here, my yearbook, it said, what are your ambitions in life for my senior year? It said, teacher, coach, and beekeeper. So I follow my dreams, and that's what I've done. Now, just to give you a little background, I went to Northbridge High School, graduated, I'm a 6th-generation beekeeper. I'm going back to Poland in the 1840s. So my dad came over to this country in 1947. He was the 5th-generation beekeeper. He made me the 6th-generation beekeeper, the first son. And then after I was born, he took me to a meeting as a young baby. It was a hot day. It was the 50th anniversary of the Worcester County Beekeepers. It was a hot, scorching day. I had just a diaper on, 6 months old. And back then, the ladies would be under the trees knitting and crocheting. It was not a female hobby. And my dad comes, gets me from my mom, and this my mom's telling her the story. My diaper, and like I say, it's hot, and so he comes over. The gentlemen were all at the beehive doing the hive opening, and here's my dad. My mom looks over. I said, Walter, he's going to get stung. He says, Helen, go sit down. Don't worry about it. It only hurts for a little bit. And so that was my introduction to beekeeping. I've been 5 years old. I got my first beehive. I went to college, certified in teaching, went 2 years into the military. And by the way, all through that period, I had beehives down south of our station. There were beehives that I helped the gentlemen with. I used to shake bee packages down there. I came back, started teaching in Northbridge High School, and for 38 years I taught school. A year after I started teaching, the superintendent, I was telling these folks, never had to search for a job. The superintendent called me 3 days after I was out of the military and said, hey, we've got a job teaching opened up here. He says, I know you are in college, a track runner and cross-country runner. We need a coach in cross-country. We need a coach in track. We need a student council advisor. Would you be willing to take it on here 3 days out of the Army? I thought I'd get a couple of weeks anyway. But the superintendent said, we need you now. Miss Bomber had to leave because of sickness. And so I started teaching. A year later, the chief apiary inspector came after me and heard I was living in Northbridge and said, we need a bee inspector. We understand you're quite a beekeeper. I said, yes. He said, would you be willing in the summers to be a bee inspector? I said, I'll give it a try. So 46 years later, last year I retired from bee inspection for the state after 46 years, 38 years of teaching, and I retired from, and when I retired from teaching, that was back 2009, Harvard University calls me up and says, Ken, this Dr. Lou at Harvard University, the bees are dying in large numbers. As you know, we want to do a study on, a 6-year study on why the honeybees are dying. I said, I just retired from teaching and go to travel all over Europe with my wife. And so he says, Ken, you know the dire desperation of the bees. He says, you'd run the beehives for Harvard and you'd take care of the samples, taking the samples and observing any kind of irregularities in the beehives for us. And I said, Dr. Lou, can I think of, he says, Ken, this is for the bees. And so my wife says, you can't ever say no. So I took on the Harvard study. 2 weeks later, Jeff Pettis from the Beltsville Bee Lab, the National Bee Lab, calls me up and he says, Ken, and he knew me, I knew Jeff over the years, and he says, the Asian longhorn beetle is coming to the area. We need a study on honeybees to see how the tree injection is going to affect the honeybees. This was the Asian longhorn beetle, devastating maple trees. And so he said, we need you to do a 5-year study with us. You run the beehives up here to where the Asian longhorn beetle's been discovered there, West Boylston, Shrewsbury area. I said, Jeff, I said, I just took on a study. I just retired from teaching. I took on a study with Harvard. He says, Ken, this is for your country. So guess, can't say no. All right. I said, I haven't even told my wife because we were supposed to travel. And she says, you know, one evening I said, Deb, sit down. You want a cup of tea? Honey? She says, what's wrong? What's wrong? She knew. I said, you know how we were going to go to London and Paris this coming year here with the, after retiring? Yeah, when are we leaving? I says, I just took on a study with Harvard and with the USDA, and it's going to be about 5 or 6 years. She's looking, no, I know your love for the bees. Go ahead. She was good about it, and I did, and we just finished up a few years back, both studies. And so I now retired from teaching, I retired from as bee inspector, finished the 2 studies. Now I can kick back, get up in the morning, have a cup of coffee and say, what do I want to do today? That's after I run my 150 beehives for 3 days of the week. But I got 4 days a week that I can just kick back and relax. So anyway, I'd like to tell you a little bit about the honeybees. As you know, they're in a desperate situation. We've been losing 40% of our bees worldwide since the 1990s, late 1990s. We started noticing bees dying, not making it through the winters, just dying out. And of course, I had been part of the 2 studies, and obviously a number of factors. First of all, in 1989, this little mite came in, and this little mite that came here, moved in from Mexico and up through in the United States, this is the size it would be on a human being, sucking the lifeblood out of me. This is 800 times the size of the mite that's on the bees. But that's what it would compare to on me. And that, along with 3 new viruses that have occurred and been brought into this country, along with the old viruses. And so what's happening, a new set of pesticides, the neonicotinoids, came in. The Harvard study and the USDA study looked at both of those, the effects along with the mite and the viruses, and that was the cause. You can read the paper that was published out of Harvard. I'm the second writer after Dr. Liu. You know, as a teacher, I used to walk around like this. After the Harvard study, I'd walk around like this. You know, so it taught me a lot. Both studies, and I was not a scientific person, so to speak. I was a history teacher. But with both scientific studies, I really learned a lot on the scientific end of research and what you have to do as a scientist. I took care of the bees, the sampling. I'd go in under the microscopes and watch these scientists. They're brilliant scientists at Harvard, and they came up with the cause of why the bees are dying. And, you know, it's up to Monsanto and Bayer are both powerful organizations, and of course the neonicotinoids are certainly liked by farmers because they're systemic. They don't have to continue spraying all the time, but the damage that it does to the honeybees is tremendous. So with that, I'll do my presentation here and start it up. As you'll see in this first picture, I've been beekeeping a long time. Here you can see me at the parting of the seas with Moses. And you can see the bee veil here. After that event was over, I headed down to the Nile and worked with the beehives along the Nile. They were on the lotus plants. So I've been at it a long, long time. And here you can see me at 5 years old with my first beehive here. On the left here, my dad is on the right. He's my mentor and taught me everything there is about beekeeping. He was one of the prominent beekeepers in Massachusetts many, many years because he had been keeping bees for his whole lifetime. And under his grandfather and great-grandfather and great-great-grandfather, going back to the 1840s. So it's in, when people ask me, what nationality are you? I said, I'm half Polish, half bee. And that's what a hive looks like. When you open up a hive, it's so mystifying. You'll see 80,000 little honeybees looking up at you, just like right here where I just gave them their breakfast and honey. And you can see these little honeybees. They're all eating right now because they're hungry. I fed them last night, and then this morning, just a little while ago, I gave them some honey, and they're eating away here. We'll let you pass it around after, and you can see the honeybees. But that's 80,000 looking up at their eyes with you, just wondering, who are you? You know, I can only imagine, but if you approach them correctly, they'll be fine. Now, I put this in here because there's a partnership that's very important. For millions of years, the honeybees and the flowers, it was a love affair between the two. Because of what's happening out there, these bees aren't surviving on their own. Man has now had to intercede, and it's a three-way partnership. That's the only way these bees are going to succeed until they can overcome these obstacles. And here you can see the bees build up. Starting in about January, they start building up again in the hive, building up to from 8,000 in January to some 75, 80,000 bees by May, middle May. So they're reaching their peak. Guess what else around here is reaching its peak? The flowers. The apple blossoms, the strawberries, the dandelions are coming out, the maple trees are. So guess what? The bees are building to their height, and the flowers are there for them. And I'd like to read this little passage to you. It is one of the most beautiful passages out of this old book that I found right here that was ready to be thrown away. I found it at a yard sale. Go to your fields and your gardens, and you shall learn that it is the pleasure of the bees to gather the honey of the flower. But it is also the pleasure of the flower to yield its honey to the bee. For to the bee a flower is a fountain of life, and to the flower a bee is a messenger of love. And to both the bee and the flower, the giving and the receiving of pleasure is a need and an ecstasy. So be it in your pleasures, like the flowers and the bees. And you know what? I'm thinking about rewriting this and adding man to it, because it has become a love affair between man, the flowers, and the bees. We're planting pollinator plants for the bees. More and more people have gotten into the beekeeping, and we're taking care of both. Putting more flowers out there, starting more beehives, and we're involved in this partnership. It's a love affair. And all these beekeepers, I can see the love they have for the bees. You get into a beehive, there's nothing like it. It's a love affair. You see the miraculous things that go on in a beehive. And it just, I have psychiatrists from UMass Medical that I started as beekeepers. And they said, Ken, this is the most rewarding thing. You forget about everything. And it takes away the worries that we have. Or the psychiatrist is one of the most mentally tough jobs there is. And doctor, you know, I always say to her, Rebecca Knapp, I said, what would you rather do, counsel with a patient or bees? She said, by all means, the bees. And so I started the first state trooper in Massachusetts with a beehive. Guess what? Now there's 29 state troopers with beehives. It's like wildfire, catches on. There's over 7,000 beekeepers in Massachusetts, only used to be about 900. But everybody's getting into beekeeping. It's such a relaxing hobby, and friend tells friend, or occupation, if you're in an occupation, it spreads, and before you know it, now there's four psychiatrists at UMass that are keeping bees. So, you know, the word spreads. And now the bees, what they need is in 3 miles in all directions, a foraging area where they're going to get dandelions, clover, all the different plants. And that's the other thing that's threatened us with all this development and all these $10,000 lawns, I call them. Not a weed, not a dandelion, not a chickweed, not a clover in it. Well, guess what? They don't have the foraging they need to supply their needs. Honey has all these nutrients that they need to survive on. That's why one of the other reasons they're not healthy. These bees are fighting to try to get the foraging they need, that blend of nutrients that they're going to get from the nectar. And so that's the other obstacle here for honeybees, is the pollinated gardens that you people are starting here. That's fantastic. That's what they need. Instead of that 10,000 lawn, let the dandelions grow. I can share with you the neighbor up the street. I have dandelions growing, and then the fluffs start flying by. Rich says, Ken, he says, your dandelion fluffs are all coming up and planting in my lawn. I said, Rich, no problem. Just push the fluffs over to the next yard by going like this. And it upsets him to no end, because my lawn is, I have a sign, excuse the weeds, I feed the bees. Yeah. That's exactly what they're doing. But that's what they need, is 2-3 miles. It's good to plant the pollinator gardens, but bees need acres and acres and acres. And that's what's important along the highways. Every little bit helps, but the more you can plant, the more it's going to help the bees, because they need the nutrients of that honey. And for us, we're getting those nutrients from each of the different plants. In this bottle of honey, which, by the way, I'm going to have a raffle here for this bottle of honey here. It's got all the nutrients, because New England honey has all different plants. A lot of specialized honeys, like on the cranberry bogs down there, it's all cranberry honey, nectar. It's good, but this wildflower mix, we call it, has the blend. That's why for allergies, even for us, in our health, the bees need those, but you know what? This also helps humans, because all the pollen's in here. As you eat that honey, your body builds up a tolerance. I had 16 teachers taking the local honey for my principal as well. Took that. He said, Ken, I wouldn't believe it if I didn't do this myself. And they go to flower, suck up the nectar, take the pollen, all different kind of colors of pollen from the different flowers, which have high protein. This is very high protein, and they need it. They have the carbohydrates, is the honey with the nutrients, and then the pollen that has nutrients and the protein. And in this beehive, you're going to find 3 types of bees. When you go in there and you learn about, it's not just a bee is a bee is a bee. In a honey beehive, there are 3 types of bees. The first one here on the right are the worker bees. That little jar you pass around, those are all the females. They're females. The workers, the females do all the work in the beehive. They do everything in the beehive. And I said to my wife, what's happened over the millions of years getting to humans? I says, you should be doing all the work. I should be kicking back. And she said, yeah, right. And so, but the females do all the work. These are females that can't be impregnated and lay fertile eggs. So the queen does all that. The males, that's the drones. They're the big husky guy. You'll see the bees in hive. And they are there for mating with the queen. Its only purpose of the drones is to mate with the queen. New queens are every year formed, and they have to mate those queens so they can lay fertile eggs, which makes the worker bees. Unfertile eggs make boy bees, the drones. And so, of course, the queen is by far the most important one in that hive, because she lays 1,500 eggs a day. Can you imagine if a chicken farmer had a chicken that could lay that many eggs a day? Everybody would be chicken farmers. But 1,500 eggs a day, and only till recently we thought the queen kept going all night and day. She gets into transient periods which rest, but for the most part, she's going day and night, laying eggs, starting in January, ending in November around here. Down south, it's year-round. But the temperature's up here, so the bees have learned to adapt to that warmer period, laying the eggs.
What egg makes the queen? What egg makes the queen? How does the queen get made?
Queen gets mated. When the new queen is hatched out once a year, bees swarm. The old queen leaves with half the hive. The other new queen that hatches out, she goes out on mating flights. And there's 15, 20 drones all waiting her in the drone zones. And they're all waiting for their turn. And a queen, over a course of 2-3 days, will be mated by as many as 15 drones. But the sad part is the drones die after they mate. And they sacrifice their life for the good of the colony. And like I say, they don't do any work otherwise. So my wife says, the boys have all the fun. And so, like I said, in the fall, they pay the price. The worker bees throw all the drones out of the hive. Say, you didn't work? You're not going to eat the food over the winter that we need here. And they're all thrown out. I see them all out in the grass. It's cold. The grass is all wet. And they're being kicked out and out there shivering. And I said, look, my wife, look at the poor guys all out there. They're going to have to die. She said, that's the way it should be in the human race. You know, but let me go on. I'm going to show you some great slides. My teacher friend of mine took these. Here's the adult bee and the house bee. First 2 weeks of the bee's life, they stay in the beehive, clean the hive. They do all the jobs in the hive. After 2 weeks, they go out and get the nectar and the pollen. They become foragers. And here you can see the adult bee that's come in from foraging nectar into its honey stomach. Here's the house bee. They put their tongues to their proboscis like a tube, suction tube. And the house bee sucks the nectar out of the adult bee's stomach and deposits it in the cells. In other words, in a frame, these wax frames that they build out of wax that they make, they're all six-sided. Just miraculous how they build these. Every cell is the same size, all six-sided. It's like a miracle in itself. Yeah. And what happens is this house bee then, and that means the field bee can get right out and get more. They have it planned out so well, so strategic. And here you can see the guard bees. The guard bees stay at the entrance. All the bees in that hive smell the same. In other words, it's not like us. We all smell different. The bees all smell the same from a pheromone in the queen. So the guard bees can tell right away if a bee doesn't belong to that hive because of the smell. Plus, they release the smell, so the bees all flying in to different hives, they know which one's there by the smell, the pheromones we call it. The pheromone is the smell of everything in that hive. And we can't smell it, but the bees can smell that difference between hives. And these guard bees will go after a bee that don't belong there. Or they'll go after a bumblebee that tries to get in and rob, because a bumblebee is bigger. And they will, 6, 7 honeybees will heat it up, surround it, heat it up, and kill it. Because bees can stand temperatures, including bumblebees, to about 95 degrees. Over that, they'll kill them. The overheating will kill the bee. So that's how bees, the guard bees, very important. Those are the first 2 weeks they do this. After that, they become field bees. Here you can see, next slide here, here's a house bee cleaning out a little dead bee, a dead larva. They keep that wax comb polished, ready for the queen to lay. If it's not polished, the queen won't lay in there. They have to go back and clean it. You'll see what the queen does, how she checks out these cells. And here's the water gathering bee. When they first become foragers, Tom Seeley just came out with this study 4 years ago, and he found there's a whole group of bees that are water gatherers. And it made sense because the little baby bees need water. The house bees, before they go out to fly, they need water. How was this accomplished? Nobody ever thought about it. But Tom Seeley from Cornell found out that these bees gather water, and they bring it in, and the nurse bees use it to feed the baby bees the water. The adult bees that haven't yet gone out for foraging, it's put on the frames, and they get water. The water gatherers, see them gathering water here or they might go to the stream, they might go to the lake. They don't go to salt water, so they don't go to oceans, but they go to fresh water, and they gather it and bring it back to the hive. And it makes sense. Every creature needs water. But for years, nobody thought about that. And then realized there's a whole group, cast of bees, that do bring in the water. And here you see close up, this is the gland that releases the smell. All those bees have that same smell. They release it in the hive, so that whole hive knows they belong. That queen is their queen by the smell, the pheromone. Here's the nurse bee. I love to watch the nurse bees. They eat the honey and the pollen, chew it up, add enzymes from a gland in the back of their heads, hyperpharyngeal glands they're called. I learned all these scientific things with the Harvard study, but these glands release all these nutrients also into the baby bees. These are the baby bees that are hatching. They hatch out from an egg. 3 days later, they become little larvae. And these nurse bees I love it to watch them, because these nurse bees are trying to get to all the larvae, because not like human babies, I want to eat, I want to eat, yeah. These are releasing a pheromone. Feed me, feed me, feed me. I can imagine they must be going nuts, the nurse bees. Feed me, and releasing that pheromone. And it's a little human society in a miniature form, but little differences like, the way we feed our babies and the way bees do it. But the nurse bees are very interesting characters. And that's just all the different jobs that the bees in the hive do. And you can watch them. That's the fascinating. I tell beekeepers, get in there. Watch what's going on. That is the most fascinating to see these god bees. You can see right away, they'll fly near you and smell who you are. And if you're not hurting them, I work the bees without a veil and a t-shirt. And if you know how to work them on a nice day, temperature's right, and you're not crushing them, because when you crush them, they release a defense pheromone, says sting. And so, but I can work them. The Boston Globe did the article on me 7-8 years ago. They called me the bee whisperer. And I've held that term. He couldn't believe. He came with this big camera. He said, am I going to get stung? Do I need it? I said, I guarantee you, the way I treat these bees, you won't get stung. He spent 3/4 a day with me with this big lens right in on the bees. He's got great pictures. If you go to a Boston Globe, I think 7-8 years ago, you'll see 2 pages full article on me and call me the bee whisperer, because I talk to the bees. Come down, girls. Don't relax, girls. And because the drones can't sting. They have no stinger. That's why you see some beekeepers putting them all over their arm. They're putting drones on there because the drones can't sting. So don't be deceived. Next time you say, are those drones? And here's the drone. You can see the big eyes, big compound eyes, big heavy set body. And they mosey around, they're usually all together in one and waiting for the queens to go out to get mated. And then they fly out to these drone zones and mate the queens. But they sacrifice their life. Now here's the queen, the egg laying machine. 1,500 eggs a day, going day and night with little breaks in between. And here you can see she's got a court. A lot of beekeepers mark her. I don't mark mine, but they want to find her easy, new beekeepers. So look at the court around her. They groom her, they feed her, they guide her, they protect her to the hilt. She'll be protected by the last ones. When a bear goes into a hive, they protect her to the end. She's the key. Without her, they're in trouble. And of course, here you can see the head in. My fellow teacher got these photos. Here the queen, this is with a macro lens, but puts her head in, check if it's not clean, she won't lay an egg. If it's polished and clean, you'll see here, this picture here, one of the bee journals gave him money, paid him to have this photo in the bee journal. But you can see here, he caught this. I took her out of the cell. There's the egg coming out of the ovipositor. Just in time, we got her, and she had it 3/4 of the way out, and he got the picture. It's a rare picture because you really would see this type of picture. But what happens, she lays that egg at the bottom of the cell. In 3 days, it hatches into this little grub. They feed it this high diet of pollen and honey. And of course, you can see here in this picture, look at all the eggs. She just keeps going. She just keeps laying one after the other. Boom, boom, boom. All through the night and day. It takes a little breaks in between, but she keeps going. And in 3 days, they hatch into a little baby one. And as the nurse bees feed it 3-4 times a day, that thing gets big. In 7 days, what happens is, look, they're filling up the whole cell. Every one of these cells, they're filling up the whole cell. And that's why they make them to that size, because they know that that's the size the larva will grow into in 7 days. They've got this down so scientific that it's unbelievable in a hive. And here you can see they cap it over after 7 days, and for the next 14 days, it develops into a pupa and becomes ready to hatch out in 21 days. From the time the egg is laid to the time it hatches, it's a 3-week period. And here, this next slide, this is the miraculous thing. As part of the USDA study, the chief scientist and I uncapped several cells to see how long. We didn't uncap, but we timed it. From the time the first little puncture comes through in the capping, it's about a 35 to 40-minute struggle by a bee to get out, to hatch. Because the bees don't help them. The other bees don't chew the capping off. They do this all themselves. They chew around, they're coming out into the world. And here you can see the struggle. Look at it, as it uncaps it, the 2 little legs pulling, because they're in there tight, pulling and struggling. We watch that struggle, 35 minutes, 40 minutes of struggling. Look at here, resting, just tired out, looking up, wondering the world around them for the first time. Seeing all these bees walking over them, it is the most satisfying feeling to see this baby hatching, struggling. Look at all sweated up, all wet, the hairs on it, and coming out, just about coming out. And what I do with new beekeepers when I was inspector, new beekeepers love their bees. I say, uh-oh, what's wrong? What's wrong? I say, uh-oh, shh, I don't want to do any brain damage. But I'd take a little tweezers, I'd speed it up. I'd pull off the cappings, and then with the tweezers, give it a little pull up to help it out. And what's wrong? I said, shh. And all of a sudden the bee comes out. The bee comes out. And I say, it's a girl. And you know what? Almost everybody, how do you know that? How do you know that? It's a worker bee. It's not a drone. Oh, that's right. But that's what it, look at it, this is Suzanne. Isn't she a cutie? Look at that. Little brown eyes looking up at you. The wet fur, she hasn't dried off. She's going to, for about an hour, dry off, strengthen up, get some strength, see what's going around her. That is the most beautiful experience to see that bee for a minute. I sit there sometime and watch, and like I said, we've timed it, but we can speed it up. I've delivered more babies than any obstetrician. Bee babies I'm talking about, not human babies. And so that's the life, that's the cycle they go through in 21 days. And every 21 days, there's a whole batch of bees hatching. And 2 weeks after they're in the hive doing house cleaning, nurse bees, water, they become water gatherers, then they become foragers, nectar and pollen. They're bringing in, because those are the 2 foods that are necessary. Without them, and that's where there's a shortage. That's another issue facing the honeybees today. Those beautiful $10,000 lawns. And on my day growing up, all dandelions, clover, chickweed, all the things that bees need. My dad knew that coming over from Poland. He said, my mother was, we don't have a nice lawn. My dad said, don't worry about that. The bees are going to like this better. And sure enough, yellow dandelion. I always look when I put my beehive somewhere, a lot of dandelions, a lot of maple trees, Russian olive, goldenrod, all the key plants they need throughout all the seasons. That would give them balanced nutrient diet. From all the seasons, they get all the... And you can see here, in this next slide here, the pollen, they're bringing in on the pollen baskets. They go around. That's why we get food. They cross-pollinate all this pollen from plant to plant, and we get food. Apples, peaches, pears, plums, strawberries, blackberries, blueberries, all the vegetables, cucumbers, squash, melons. They need pollination. Yeah, bumblebees do it, but in a bumblebee nest, there's only 100 or 120. In a honeybee nest, 60, 80,000 bees. That's why the cranberry bogs have to bring in honeybees, because they need all those plants have all these little flowers, and when you got acres and acres of that, the bumblebee's nowhere even close. The honeybee is the only one that can do that kind of number, and that's why man is dependent on it. Some say they claim that Einstein said this: if the bees die off, we'll only live for a certain time after. That was never said by Einstein. That was never quoted by Einstein, by the way. So just so you know, but that would happen. There's no question. That's why there'd be wars over it. If food shortages all of a sudden in the United States and people starving, there's going to be wars, we can tell you. When people are dying and starving, they're going to fight for food wherever it is. And there's the pollen. Look at a pollen basket full of pollen. Look at this bee. The chief scientist from Beltsville and I, we took the pollen off and weighed it on this scale he's got. That pollen weighed a little more than the bee itself. And they fly. The aerodynamics of honeybees, they'll go 3 miles, 4 miles, flying, bringing that back to the hive for the young baby bees. And of course, they store it into the cells in this same. This is used to store the honey, the nectar, and have the baby bees. Those cells are all for all 3 of those functions. And the pollen is used as high protein to feed the baby bees so they get strong. Protein. And that's the fields they get it from. Vegetables, they can get it. Pumpkins. You'll try some pumpkin honey from pumpkins down in Arkansas. They take the nectar and the pollen from pumpkin, and you'll see how you like pumpkin honey. Nectar. Well, it's honey now. They make it into honey. But here you can see the field of crops that they gather from. They bring the nectar back. That's got 80% water in it. Nectar is high in water content. And then they fan all night. And what's that process called? Get the water out? Evaporation. They evaporate down to 20% or less of water. Down to 18%, actually. Under 18% it becomes honey. Above that, it's got too much water. And at high levels of water, honey ferments. That's why people make mead out of it. The first alcoholic drink known by the Egyptian pharaohs was mead. Well, I can't let you taste it in a public building, because I had it at the senior center a few years back. And one gentleman, I'm talking at the end of my presentation, and I had all these little cups of mead, and people trying it. All of a sudden, I'm talking to the director, and I see he's one, looks around. Second one. I said to the director, I said, you might want to go stop him because that's got 15% alcohol. They said, I don't want him driving home. So she had to go over and tell him no more than numbers. And that's me. But that's the honey in there. And what happens is after they cap it over. After 18% or less, they cap it over and seal it for the winter so they can eat. They need a hive needs 80 pounds of honey. In other words, 80 jars like this of honey to survive. And they need about 8 pounds of pollen. So during the winter months when there's nothing out there, in the spring, early spring, late fall, they've got food. They know up here they have to store it. And that's why we as beekeepers can't be greedy. I tell beekeepers, yeah, you can feed them sugar syrup, but it has no nutrients. That's the other big problem. People like to take the honey, all honey, and then feed sugar syrup. It makes unhealthy bees. I knew that. My dad knew that back in the 40s. You gotta leave. You can't be greedy. You gotta be. They give you honey extra for the most part, but sometimes they don't. 1958, they gave us very little. My dad got no extra honey. And here you can see they build the wax. They have wax glands, and that's the neatest thing. They ooze out from under the abdominal section of the bee. They ooze out this little flakes of wax. And then with their mandibles, they shape this beautiful structure. Amazing, miraculous what they can do. And she doesn't look happy, does she? That's Sarah. Sarah's had to bring in the propolis, the bee resins, takes the pine resins, the plants, different plants release resins that are gooey, but they have certain, we never knew that till Milos Spivak came out with a recent study, why they went after those resins and they propolized everything. They glue it all up with this reddish type of sticky stuff. You can't get off your hands. It's hard. My dad used to have a sucking on it for sore throats. I'll tell you, it did the job. It's now Milo's study found that it fights bacteria that come into the hive for their health. I used to scrape it all out. Now I just leave it. It's there, and we should have known that. It's there for a purpose. They don't just do things for nothing. And that fights disease, helps the bees to fight disease. And of course, the bad part of that is she's got to get that all off of her and deposit it. So now, they are masters at organization. Here's the girl bees, the worker bees. They store, here's the drones. You notice they don't care much for the drones. They don't want those drones eating all the honey, wouldn't do no work. So all worker brood, the few drones they need for mating of a new queen, and here's the pollen, here's the honey. It's all there. The nurse bees go get the honey, the pollen, feed the baby bees. How well planned, they're well organized. And that's a hive, what it looks like. This is the nest that they live in. This is the extra honey. But in some years, where there's not much, you don't get any, or you get very little. But I always make sure that they've got enough honey. I hate feeding sugar syrup. In 1958, my dad puts in his notebook, I felt so bad I had to feed him sugar syrup. Because...
What did you just say? There's extra honey at the top?
This is these boxes up above. These are the big chambers here. Yeah. That's where they live. That's where they put their honey, their pollen. That's where they keep their propolis. This is where all the bees hatch out. And up here we put more supers. That's the extra for the most part. But I always leave one of these boxes so to make sure they have enough. So if the fall, like last fall, we didn't get that great of a nectar flow, I saved them. Most beekeepers took those extra boxes off, used it, and it came the fall, guess what? They had to feed sugar syrup. They had no honey. I know. I've been at it a long time. I know what's needed and how to plan for beekeeping. But new beekeepers, oh, honey, wow. They take the honey, eat it, and then the end of the season there's no nectar flow because it's hot, dry. Remember how dry it was and how hot it was in the late season? There was no nectar. The plants shut down their nectaries, didn't release any nectar. That's why I said nature controls. I spoke about it here earlier. And nature takes control. There's nothing you can do. As a human, nature is in control. There's a dry period. Those plants are trying to protect themselves. They shut down the nectaries. The bees can't get any nectar, and they end up. Now, once a year, bees swarm. Now, swarming means they're making a new queen, and they're going to split. Half of the bees are going to go with the old queen. The new queen hatches out, takes the other half, gets mated, comes back. Now you got 2 hives instead of 1. But the sad part of swarming, years ago my dad said, let them go, they'll repopulate nature. Now, the bees that swarm out, they can't survive on their own because there's man's not there to help them. We have to use oxalic acid, formic acid to kill the mites, to give the bees a chance. And so as a result of that, it's a tough, they need man. That's why I think about rewriting that poem to include man. You might see that published someday here soon. My poem about the love affair between man, bee, and flower. And that's what it's coming to. That's why people are planting, like with your pollinator gardens. And that's the swarm. Nothing like 60,000 bees or 30,000 bees swarm out, land on somebody's porch. It freaks a non-beekeeper out to no extent. 3 years ago now in Cambridge, Mass., very thickly settled down there downtown, I got a call from the beekeeper. Ken, I knew him because I inspected a beehive. Ken, can you get down here? Cambridge, he said, I got a terrible problem. Please, I said, what's wrong? Just can you come down here? I went down, I headed down. What's the problem? And his name was Larry. I said, Larry, what's the problem? He says, Ken, come on over. Went 2 houses down. The couple that owned the house had 2 young kids. They had a round swimming pool in the back. They were out. They left the kitchen door open. Larry's bees swarmed out, landed on the light fixture in the kitchen. They settled. When I got there, I went over. He said, well, in the meantime, Mom had come around with the 2 boys. They'd had enough. The dad was in the back cleaning up. And all of a sudden, she screams in downtown Cambridge. That drew people from right there. She was right now downtown. All of a sudden, I got there. There's 15 people standing outside of her apartment out there. And all of a sudden, I opened the door. Because she had slammed the door closed when she ran out of the house with the boys. Slammed the door closed. Well, guess what? All the bees that were gathering already to make for their flight to a new nest, they were gathering already, and they couldn't get back into the swarm. And so all of a sudden, there's all these thousands of bees outside the door flying around trying to get in. I go there, first thing I do, I open the door. She says, you're letting more in. I says, don't worry about it. So I said, she says, can you get them out? Yeah, I can get them out. She says, how long will it take you? I says, I'll be back tonight at 7:30. Leave the door open. I said, they're either going to leave and find another home, or they'll be here till tomorrow and leave. She says, but you're going to be back? I said, I guarantee you I'll be back. She says, well, I said, you can use your living room. You can go upstairs. I said, just don't go into the kitchen. Leave the door open. She says, well, how are we going to eat? She said, can't get into the kitchen. I said, McDonald's, what's wrong with that? Oh, I guess we could do that. And so I get there at 7:30. Unbelievable. I brought a bucket. I brought a ladder. I went to my friends in Somerville. Waited rather than going all the way back to Northbridge. I get back there, and all of a sudden, still there, that big swarm right on the big light fixture. I go in there. I take the ladder, put it there. I put a bucket right under the swarm, right there on the ladder. This big ball, you can picture all covered with bees. I spray some sugar syrup on them so they couldn't fly. There's a little technique to it. Then with my bare hands, and I could see Mom, the 2 boys, and Dad looking around the corner from the living room, wondering, how's he going to do this? And in one swoop, whoom, they clump. I put the cover on. I said, here's your swarm. That's all there is to it? I said, that's it. But they were amazed. I got every last bee. I took it home. I got myself another hive. You know, so I've got loads of swarm stories. But anyway, I put some of these other slides just to finish up before we go to the table here. Yellow jacket. They're the aggressive ones. Bees are very docile unless you're disturbing the nest, they won't sting you. The yellow jacket will come on your soda can, on your ice cream, and they're aggressive. But you notice, bright yellow, black, no hairs on them. One pair of wings only. So don't ever blame a honeybee for what a yellow jacket did. And as my father, next one here, my dad's red and white. What are the colors of Poland? Red and white. We had red and white hives, the Polish colors. And of course, he's my mentor. And here you can see me here last year talking to a big meeting of beekeepers. That's when I had dark blonde, now I'm light blonde. Oh, that's 1983, I'm sorry, I thought it was last year. I'm light blonde now, but 284 people showed up at the meeting at my house. All of a sudden, my wife and my mother prepared for 100 people, spaghetti meatballs, strawberry shortcake. Guess what? They had to quickly run out to the market to buy triple. And we had spaghetti and meatballs for the supper, and we had strawberry shortcake. And so for 284, triple instead of 100, we had to feed 300. But anyway, those are the meetings that you have fun at. People learn about beekeeping. I highly recommend the hobby. And I'm just going to get in quickly here about the hobby. I don't think they can stay.
You want to do the?
Why don't we? Why don't we finish up here, and can I go here? About another 10, 15 minutes.
Yeah, she can stay. Right, Maria can stay. Go ahead. Do what do you want?
Okay. Now, the hobby of beekeeping. Obviously, you're going to need, if you want to keep bees and have fun with bees and help the bees, you're going to, obviously put on the veil. Come on up, Rick. Well, you're going to need to put on a veil. So once you put that on, you want your face protected, because if you crush a bee or something, you might get stung. So you have to be careful. Now, the other thing you're going to need is a hive tool. A hive tool. Everything's glued up with that propolis. So this hive tool, once you come over here, this hive tool, you pry it up. And sometimes, if you haven't been into that hive for like a week, it's all glued up and you have to really work hard. So hold on, there's your hive tool. Now, you're going to need a little smoker. Pine needles and create some smoke. So when you first go in the hive, you give them a little smoke. They think there's fire. And they go down and get the honey thinking they're going to have to leave, like out in California. You should have saw the swarms coming out of the trees in those fires, because the bees knew fire means they got to leave, and they take as much honey as they can in their honey stomach and leave. So this senses they know fire. So you give them a little smoke, they start going down, but then you stop. But they're distracted now, so you can go in, and they're distracted getting honey, so they're even less aggressive. They're not going to realize what you're doing. And if you're gentle, that's going to be good. And then what you do is you go in and get your frame of honey, because you feel like having honey that night, or making strawberry shortcake, a recipe that I use that requires honey. And so you're going to take your frame of honey that they've capped over. You know that this is now less than 18% moisture. It's a nice thick honey capped over with wax. And what you do is now, that's why you need that hive tool. Now with this hand, you're going to need this. You just pull this frame out of the hive. You pried it out. Now what you're going to do is take it to the honey house. And obviously to spin it out, you've got to uncap it. So pretend and go up like this with the hive. Here's this. And take this with the other hand, kind of lean it on the table here. And you're going to start at the bottom and just, no, don't really do it though. Don't really do it.
Okay.
All right, just come on, make it off you. You cut that like paper, thin. And it comes off so nice with this sharp honey uncapping knife. Now you do the other side. And do the same thing. but not really doing it. Okay, go ahead, do it. All the way up. All right. He wants to get at the honey.
All right, let's go.
All right, now you can put your knife down there. Now you're going to put this in the extractor, okay? Put this in extractor, right in. It's a round barrel. Now you're going to do this, spin. It's going to take you to spin it. You got to really like this. And I'll tell you how long you do it to spin that honey out. Faster. No, around like this. There you go. Fast, fast, faster, faster. All right, stop now. We're going to turn it around, the frame around.
Do it again.
Now again, go ahead. It's about 3 minutes to go on steady like that, spinning out. So now he's going to take out the honey and put it into a jar, and he's going to want to see what color. What color? That's the honey. We don't want that. Yeah. What color honey? And now you're going to taste that. Taste that. Go with your finger like this and taste it.
Do I still have this on?
Yeah, under your veil. All right, under your veil and taste it. Oh, that's dandelion. Dandelion honey. Oh my God, is that good? And he knows he's got dandelion honey because it was early in the season he spun it out. And so he's all excited. Now, so he's going to jar up his jars. He's going to go through a spigot like this, jar up, and then close the spigot when it's full. And so now he's done the whole process he's gone through. So how about a big hand? So that's what kind of it's all about. I know people think it's the hobby and watching what we saw here. That's the more and more beekeepers don't care as much about the honey if they get it or not. They want to leave it for the bees. I'm seeing a change. And they realize bees are important. And so they're doing it for the hobby and going into that hobby. It's miraculous the things they see and they learn. I get calls constantly about what they're seeing. What does that mean? What does this? And it's nice to be able to answer them. And these new beekeepers, we had 285 at our bee school in Worcester. Out of 285, 216 started beekeeping. First year for them. And new beekeepers, they got all kind of questions. Even one I went out to, there's Dad in his outfit, Mom in her suit. Then there was what's her name, Martha, the oldest daughter. She was 11. Then Mike, who was 9, and then little Larry, they call him. Little Larry was 4 years old. His suit's hanging on him, and they're all walking out to the beehive. I'm behind with little Larry at the end. I said, Larry, you like the bees? Yeah, he says, but I'm hot. You know, and I said, I know, but you're going to keep the bee suit on. You don't want to get stung. So I gave them each a job. There was, when was that, August? The August that I went out with them. I said, okay, Dad, you're going to uncap. Mom, you're going to spin. And you take turns. I says to the oldest girl, I says, now, what you're going to do is take the empty frames out, put them back in a box, and put in more full ones. And then I says to the oldest boy, Mike, I said, Mike, what you're going to do is filter it. And you're going to filter it through a screen, a little netting, so the wax comes out of it. You know, you want a bigger filter so everything's getting through except the pieces of wax. And you can eat them. That's no problem. Wax isn't going to hurt you because some people love the comb honey that we cut out. Like I cut out a frame, like that frame. I cut it up, and a lot of people love the right in the frame. Right in the frame. You just eat the wax in the honey. Slater's restaurant down in Webster buys my comb honey. They put it on their cheese platters, little chunks, and people take it with their cheese and their crackers. It's wonderful in a comb honey. And so what you do, and then I said to little Larry, I said, little Larry, you're going to be the honey taster. So every time you go, that your brother's got a jar, filter and jar. You're going to taste it first. So there's a little Larry into the, Dad, taste this. You know, he was all excited. He says, it tastes like apricot. 4-year-old, he knew, but they eat apricots, I guess, I forget what he said, Dad was saying. We eat a lot of apricots because of what's in apricots. So anyway, the whole family was involved with this thing. It was great to see a whole family involved in a hobby of beekeeping. But you got, you know, different kind of honey, so you get the honey. I eat pollen now as an older guy. The energy at night isn't, you know, I used to stay up till midnight and no problem. I started getting a little zapped, you know, and you get to be my age at 84, then you start to weaken out, you know, and so I started taking pollen 3-4 times a week, high protein. And my track buddies from college, we went out to dinner. The coach left us a $20,000 fund to go out to eat and have a few drinks. And we go out once a month. And you know what? 9 o'clock, I'm zapped. I'm going to head out. I said, guys, it's only 9 o'clock. I'm just ready to party here. What are you on? I said, I'm on pollen. And I did. And now I got 5 of them taking pollen. And it gives you that extra energy. You know, it's not going to make you young, but I'll tell you, I see a difference because it's high protein. Because Curtis, one of my buddies, he went home and took 2 tablespoons. You only take a half a teaspoon. 2 tablespoons. Kay said, Ken, he says, for a day. I was like this. I couldn't calm down. I was overdosed on pollen. But I got the bunch of them now taken and find a difference. The energy at night when you zap tends to come back. With the wax, what do we do? If you love the hobby, you don't want to, the wife or the children don't want to do the bees themselves, candles. From the wax, we melt it down. We make beautiful candles of all sorts for Christmas, red, orange for Halloween, or regular beeswax candles. And the beautiful smell from beeswax candles, just magnificent. No soot from beeswax. And then you can make, by the way, beeswax is when we melt the comb down and it turns to pure wax. Or you can make wax bars to wax things over. My daughter used to mold these beautiful candles and paint them with like the branch brown, green on the leaves, the bees she'd paint up and give to each of her friends. And then you got, like I said, this one candle here. That was 3 years ago. Now, my wife had guppies on the kitchen, on the television stand. So one day I'm looking, I melted the wax, I'm saying, what can I mold a candle? And I see the guppy bowl. I took the guppies, put them in a honey jar with water, and I molded this candle. The next day, she had to come home later, next day, I said, look, Deb, I made a 20-hour candle out of pure beeswax. Where's my guppies? She went over. I said, they like it in a honey jar. It's sweet. And so they were swimming around in there, still alive. And she said, well, how are you going to get it out? I said, with a hammer. And I said to her, I'll buy you another one. I knew she was going to, but So anyway, I made this, and I took a little heat, but that's all right. Hand cream. Moisturizing and healing. On little wounds, put this on, like your little cuts or whatever, because in the Civil War, any kind of wounds, what they put on? Honey. Honey doesn't allow bacteria to grow. King Tut's honey, still good, 3,000 years later. They had an auction, not an auction, a raffle, worldwide to beekeepers, $100 a ticket. Your name got put in, 10 little samples, and obviously the chance of winning weren't good. But hand cream, this is healing one. You get the moisturizing one. If your skin is dry, moisturizing, made out of beeswax. A little bit of honey in there. You can make lip balm. Beautiful, excellent. It's natural products. Here's the soaps I use. Beautiful. You can have to come up to the table when you do taste the honey. Smell that. It's just wonderful smell. So with beeswax, there's a whole part of the hobby with beeswax. Then you get into foods, how about making apple honey butter? Put the honey in. That adds a little extra touch to the apple butter. Raspberry honey jam. It gives the nice extra flavor. Now, I had a buddy try this out. Mead jelly. Everybody know what mead is? Honey wine, 15% alcohol. He makes jelly. He says it gives him an extra kick in the morning on his toast. And of course, the latest fad in this whole hobby is making mead. Honey wine. I've made this. You can't sell unless you get a license, but it's available. They have it out there. Some beekeepers get a lot of money, but I do it just for myself. This is mead with the cameras on me. I don't want to say I sell it, but no, I don't. But I had it at the senior center. This is the mead I had, and he had 6 or 7 of them, and I got a little nervous, so I don't do that anymore. But anyway, this is honey wine, beautiful taste. This is straight mead, all right? This is straight mead. Peach and honey mead. This is with peaches and honey. It's a nice, sweet taste. When I make my strawberry shortcake rolls, honey rolls they're called, with honey, I take my strawberries, soak them in light honey for the whole day. Soak them in this nice light honey for the whole day. When the company comes, my wife had, this a few weeks back now, she had the honey, the chicken, baked chicken with pistachio, apricot, honey stuffing, and they're coated. And everybody's raving sweet potatoes with honey, and everybody's raving about the dinner. Well, now my turn. I made the dessert. I made the rolls with the honey rolls they're called. Then I soaked the strawberries in light honey all day. When I was ready to serve dessert, I put the roll in everybody's bowl. Now I took the bowl of strawberries soaked in honey all day, pour all over the rolls, honey rolls, and then whipped cream, fresh whipped cream. And then I took this dark honey, a nice bold taste, and drizzled it all over the cream, nice drizzle. And then I took this pollen and sprinkled I had maple pollen from the maple trees, sprinkle it all over. And I remember Doug saying, "Oh my God, what a plethora of tastes. What's the recipe here?" I said, "There's no recipe. I just make it up with my own blends." And so everybody's raving about my dessert. I said, "See, Deb, I don't know if they like the chicken better or the strawberry shortcake." But anyway, cooking with honey, alcohol you can make, mead, you can make honey beer. I got a company that buys honey. It's made with Ken Warchol's beer. It's in Upton, and they make honey beer now. So, and of course, if you're not too busy like I am, I wrote the history of beekeeping in Massachusetts here, and one of the first states, as you know, the Pilgrims. After down in Virginia, the Pilgrims were the next to bring bees up here to New England. The cold weather versus the warm weather, in skeps. And they made that voyage. I can't even imagine the beehives making it, but they did. And they brought them over to the New World. They're not native honeybees to the New World. But I wrote this, being a historian and a beekeeper, it was appropriate. And so the hobby of beekeeping in itself is fascinating. You can have many parts to it. The cooking part, the wax making and wax products, honey products, the hobby of going into the hives and the fun part of it. And like I say, today we've got to protect our bees. Whatever you can do, stop beekeeping. Let dandelions grow in your lawn, chickweed, clover. You know, encourage plant fields if there's nothing. With pollinated plants, you go to the website, pollinated friendly plants, there's lists of them. And large areas. Don't think you just have to make a little. Bees need acres and acres of a crop to make honey and get their pollen that they need. So the hobby of beekeeping is an exciting one. And what I'm going to do, we're going to have here now, I'll take a few questions, have the raffle for a jar of honey. If somebody wants to buy some, I've got some that's local honey for allergies. And then we'll have the honey tasting. You can taste as many of these as you want. Matter of fact, you can taste that honey that I got for sale right there. That's my honey. It's wildflower, mixture, everything for allergies. And then from all over the world, China, Middle East, I've got Bulgaria. Try them out. Use a separate stick for each one. Don't use the same one. You can, break them in half and use for 2 if you want. Taste the honeys. And there's also these pins. I speak to it's a health company, and I do talks for them. So there's some cards there. And help yourself to a pen, 2 pens here. They're nice solid pens here for yourself. And there's some tattoos. I did these tattoos. If you got grandchildren, children, it's with water. I had the whole class. They came in the next day. The teacher was telling me. I gave them each one. They came. I made sure the parents allowed it. They had the honeybee. Yeah. The whole class came in with the honeybee right on their cheek. I got a picture of that. I should have brought it of that. So
there were never native bees. All of the bees.
Honeybees are not. Yeah, they came here. Yeah, they weren't native. Honeybees are not native to North America. Yeah, there are native bees, but not honeybees.
But they're not honeybees.
No. Honeybees were brought to America, and as these crops came in, though, from Europe, they needed the honeybees to pollinate them, so they had to bring honeybees over because those crops wouldn't get pollinated. A honey queen, because of necessity, nature over millions of years, they feed her extra nutrients. She hatches in 2 weeks, 14 days.
I don't know which one they're going to make.
Well, they make queen cells, and what happens? The first queen that hatches kills off the others, and she's the one. The old queen leaves 3 days before the new queen hatches with the swarm, and now the new queen, that first one that hatches, and usually that's the chosen one. The first one that hatches is the chosen one. They start her usually an egg as much as 6 hours earlier than the rest. So, yeah, it's amazing how over millions of years this has all evolved the way it has. Drones, 24 days. Worker bees, 21 days hatch. So, any other, yes?
Yeah, I'm wondering if there's going to be a 7th generation.
Yes, my daughter is very involved. Yeah, my daughter is very involved. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I'm glad for that. Just like my dad, I was the firstborn. He at 5 years old, he had a contest with me. Said, whoever wins, you're going to take the other one out to eat. He said, save your money that you get for selling the honey. He says, because if I win, I get more honey than you, you're going to take me out to eat. Those are the days you went out to eat once a year if you had 5 kids in a family. So we weighed up the honey that year, by 5 years old. Went in, let's weigh mine first. 76 pounds he got, my dad. Yeah, I got you. I know I won this thing. We went and weighed mine. 88 pounds. How'd you do that? What's your secret? How'd you beat me? And I said, I just did the bees. Yeah, I'm a 5-year-old kid. And I says, he says, you got a secret. I know you were doing something because you got more honey than me. I got, for a kid, that's a swelling of the head, at 5 years old. Ma, I beat Daddy's going to take me out to eat. So we went to the bungalow restaurant down below the foot of the hill. There was only 1 or 2 restaurants in the whole town, actually. And we went down there, walked down because we didn't have a car. And went down, and the menu, we said, my dad said, anything you want, you beat me. I don't know how that happened, but I'm going to pay whatever you want. So the most expensive thing on the menu, a sirloin steak, $2.95. With the potatoes and the vegetable and dessert. Guess what I had? Strawberry shortcake. That's what, I always make strawberry shortcake when I make the desserts. So all of a sudden, after that's all it took. My dad had a beekeeper. And I'm sure he's looking down and saying, you know, doing studies of scientific studies, doing bee inspector for the state of Massachusetts, speaking all around the, you know, Northeast and even into other parts, states out west that when the Harvard study, Dr. Lou couldn't do everywhere, so I'd go around and talk about the study. By the way, if you want, Google my name, read the Harvard study, 2012, 2014, Ken Warchol or Dr. Lou, L-U, he's the head of the study team, and you can read this. It's scientific. My part is all about the managing the bees, the sampling and whatever, but the paper is a scientific paper under the Harvard name.